So, you know how a lot of horror movies can be about themes such as darkness, otherworldly evils, aggression, humanity, and its effect on itself? Shit like that. Well, there's a style of music that does a lot of that as well, but you knew that because you clicked this. So today, guys, we're going to be talking about motherfucking metal. What's up, all? You've got Rob from Terror at Synth High, and today we're talking about some metal. So, based on my own personal observations, while I tend to see that not everyone who likes horror likes metal, most people I know who like metal like horror. I'm not really sure how that helps you watching this, but this episode's about metal. Growing up, I was a huge metalhead, anywhere from about middle school on. It was my favorite form of media beside horror movies. I was into all different styles of metal. My three favorite were probably a mix between thrash, death, and grindcore. So I first started listening to bands like Metallica, Slayer, Pantera, all of those staples, and then moved on to things like In Flames, Arch Enemy, Carcass, a lot more of that melodic death metal kind of scene, and then into a lot of grindcore and Napalm Death, and those kind of all fused together for me. By the end of my high school years, I was getting into more and more obscure metal, and my love for the genre had, been very solidified at that point. So today we're going to be only looking at thrash and death metal from the 2000s that had specific lyrics to horror, and I mean specifically about specific horror movies. This specific time period and subgenres had some of my favorite horror movie themed metal music of all time. That's why I wanted to start with this list for this. And the reason that I made such specific requirements as to all the albums having to have all or almost all of the songs on them relate to specific horror movies is because I think the net for metal and horror is way too big. I think it could really successfully be argued that more metal than not, since its beginnings, has been influenced by horror. So this is just to narrow that down a little bit. And the reason that I didn't add anything from, previous years is because I feel like they all have their own kind of influence in horror, and those can be talked about in different videos. And the reason that I didn't add any more modern in that is because I'm fucking old. Starting off the list at number 5 is Engorged from Portland, Oregon, with their 2002 self-titled release. They had one prior release to this in 1999, I believe, Death Metal Attack 2, and they had one album after this in 2004 called Where Monsters Dwell. The one in the middle, the 2002 self-titled, I feel is their best because it was more polished up musicianship-wise than their first album, but I feel like by the time it got to their third album, it was a little cleaner than I like in some of the production quality. Not crazy by any means. I mean, this is a very raw band, but I like that. I like my my metal and my horror kind of both, more raw. I always say dirty, gritty, mean. So it doesn't have too much of production kind of quality value like the highly polished kind of a deal. Yeah, some memorable songs off this are songs that play back to Slithis, all of the Night of the Living Dead. I think they have one for Zombie, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and Return of the Living Dead too, I believe. And a couple others as well that'll be memorable if you check that out. Shockwaves is a good one too. So yeah, check it. While Engorged focused more on blistering fast thrash metal with some death metal influences, the number 4 spot on this list is more of a style of Swedish death metal from the early 90s kind of time period, and that is Revolting, and the album I chose for them is The Terror Threshold. Revolting hail from Sweden, and like I said, they play more of a more traditional Swedish death metal type of music from the early 90s. So what I like about this kind of style is that it was before they reached, Swedish melodic death metal a few years later with bands like In Flames, like I was saying before. So it has a good mix of aggression and some melody in it. And I think that's great for this style of, representing horror as well. So this came out in 2010. Some of the horror movies that are spoken about on it are Grizzly, Slime City. I believe there's one for Motel Hell, as well as a lot of others. Actually, I don't know what all of these are about, even when reading the lyrics. So if you guys know, comment that down below, what songs they base some of these horror movies on. Okay, so for the number 3 spot on this list, I get to say the most offensive band name on this list. Fondle Corpse. I don't like the band name. I never really was a big fan of overly sexualized horror stuff in general. It just wasn't my bag. I get that it's a theme that, resonates through a lot of horror, but the script kind of part of it, not for me. Although I do have to admit that for, a band that's named after, the dead, it's really good. Fondle Corpse come from the Netherlands, and they play their own unique style of death metal. I picked their 2007 EP Blood and Popcorn for this list. Even though it's an EP, I think it's the best representation of what I think is their best time period together, playing as a band. There's only about 6 songs on the album, but I feel like they're all really solid. Some of their other albums, I like a lot of their stuff on, but I feel like some of it's hit and miss as well. They also have a really interesting guitar sound that's kind of tinty and shallow, but also very haunting on this album. I think really works well for the style that they're doing. Movies covered on the album include Halloween, using the Halloween theme with lyrics, which is very interesting. They have one for Hills Have Eyes, they have one for Chopping Mall, one for Basket Case, and there's also one, the first song on the album, which is really, really good, is the only song that's not based on one particular horror movie, as far as I know. It's called Twice the Hate, Twice the Carnage, and it really, shows that that guitar tone very, very well, I feel. So yeah, definitely check it out if you want some death metal based on some horror movies. Coming in the number 2 spot on this list is Blood Freak with their 3rd LP entitled Multiplex Massacre. Blood Freak originated in Portland, Oregon, and Multiplex Massacre, being their 3rd album, was from 2007. I feel it's their most well-rounded album. They've had some albums after this that were a little more straight death metal and death metal with grind, and they've had some albums before this that I just don't feel were as fully fleshed out as this one is in terms of the songwriting, but this one has a great mix of thrash, death metal, and a little bit of grindcore. There are songs on this from Aerobicide, Rocktober Blood, Home Sweet Home, the slasher movie from the 80s, as well as, of course, Blood Freak. Highly recommend this one. Musicianship is top-notch on it. Still an album that I listen to quite often, but not as much as the number 1 pick. And the number 1 pick for today is Frightmare's Bringing Back the Bloodshed from 2006. This was an easy pick for me. This has always been my favorite band and my favorite album by them of the horror metal music from this time period. Frightmare, like 2 other bands on this list, also comes from Portland, Oregon. There was a big horror metal scene going on then. It was a playback to, a lot of the 80s movies that I love. I feel like that was the time period when this came about, around the early to mid 2000s, was when the horror fans that were getting into that kind of stuff when they were earlier were getting to that age where they were starting to make music, and it really reflected in that area is where it really started to culminate. So it was a very cool scene to see. Frightmare is, like I said, definitely my favorite band of this style. This is their best album. They only had 2 albums. The one before this was also great. One of the reasons I love it so much is because, and you guys might have guessed this by now, the slasher theme. All their songs are based on slasher movies from the 70s and 80s. Some of the horror movies covered on this album are Friday the 13th Part 2, Don't Go in the House, Sleepaway Camp, Humongous, and a bunch of other great ones too. The singer and guitarist on this album and for this band is the same as the singer and guitarist who is the driving force behind Blood Freak. So yeah, a lot of commonalities between the 2 bands. The guys actually had a couple other bands too. One is Lord Gore, which is another death metal band. I like Blood Freak and particularly Frightmare the best out of his work. Musically, I feel like this is a perfect combination for me. It's a really pretty equal mix of thrash metal, death metal, and grindcore. Maybe a little heavier on the thrash at times. It's also got a lot of vocals that are very indicative to horror, as sometimes they have what they call quad vocals, where there's actually 4 singing lines at the same time. When that's going on, you have no idea. I mean, you can't hear the vocals. It's death metal vocals with a lot of it. So, yeah, it's going to be difficult to hear anything, but it's just cool. Sounds really good. The main difference that I see between Frightmare and Blood Freak is that with Frightmare there was a different lead guitarist, and I think he went under Sawboss, I think was the name he was using, but he wasn't available to do the other albums, so that's why I think Maniac Neil did a lot more work with Blood Freak and kind of transitioned to that. At least that's my understanding of it. So that's my 5 albums for death and thrash metal in the 2000s that have horror themes directly ingrained into them. What else, guys? What are you listening to in that vein? Or just horror music in general? Let's just open up that discussion. What do you like? What did I miss? Yeah, let's go. Comments. Boop, boop, boop. Boop, 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 boop. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, as well as commenting, subscribing, sharing, liking, and please do remember to subscribe if you have not done so already. What happens is you click down there and then I get a little bit happier inside. So the upside for you is the videos. I'm sure I'll be doing another one of these videos with metal and horror combined and their influences on me sometime soon, because honestly I really don't get to talk about this as much as I'd like to these days. I think that probably has to do with the fact that when I've brought it up historically in my professional life, it's usually ended something like this. Oh, hey, what's going on, Rob? Yeah, what are you listening to? Oh, hey, what's up? Oh, yeah, no, I'm listening to this cool death metal band, Fondle Corpse. What's going on with you? Oh, my God. No. Man, been a lot of paperwork lately. I mean, it's always coming, you know? It never feels like it's done. Yeah, you too? Are you okay? Yeah, well, at least the weekend's coming up, you know. Oh, crap. Oh, it's only Thursday? Yeah, I know. One more. Oh. Yeah, no, I asked him. And he said, he said, Fondle Corpse. Yeah, the weird one. Yeah, no, I can't. He's right here. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I guess I'll just finish up here and then go into that meeting later, right? Are you going to that? Was that all staff? You touch children, because you can't. It's not okay, you can't do it. Sitting here having to defend fictional shit. You know what came out the same year as Fondle Corpse made that album? Katy Perry did a song called You're So Gay, and I remember both you and your daughter being all about it, Cheryl, so why don't you just zip it? Katy Perry? I am old. I had to Google that for this skit.